Okay, so welcome. This is the second live session for the course which is titled Integrated Waste Management for a Smart City. As those of you who joined us in the last session as well, we will be taking up the questions which have been submitted for the live session first, and I have a printout of those. And then we will be looking at some of the queries which has been raised on the discussion forum. And after that, we will be started looking at whatever the question you will be submitting now as part of this live session. So let's get started. We have 1 hour, and I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. So with the first question that I'm going to take, which has been submitted by Ms. Malvika Saraswat. The question is, she has two questions. The question one is, with the increase in development and projects are provided environmental clearance, in which they do state term of reference in which solid waste is a component. As an environmental planner, how can we intervene to look into its cumulative impact? So I assume this question relates mostly to the construction sector or maybe some new projects, road, bridges and those new buildings and other stuff. If that's not, I request Malvika to put that on the online forum right now, and we'll clarify that as we make progress. But assuming that it is from the construction sector, yes, we can look at the impact of the construction waste. Of course, you have to look at what kind of waste is produced as a part of the construction activity. If there is a demolition activity as well, you have to take that into account. And if it's a demolition, then it becomes a very complex, because you have all sorts of material there. You have some lead-based, could be have lead-based paint on the wall. We are covering C&D waste right now. If I remember correctly, this is I think week 10. So you are getting those different types of construction and demolition waste, how to recycle them. So based on how to take the impact, of course you have to look at what are the chemicals of concern. And then what could be the potential leachability, what are if it's leaches, whether it will travel, whether it will get into the gaseous phase or the water phase, all those things that you typically do for an EIA, environmental impact assessment, you have to do that. Only thing here, the chemical of concern needs to be identified, which is essentially the chemicals used in the construction industry. And then you have concrete, you have the rebars. There are a lot of things which could be potentially recycled. Some countries, including now in India as well, there are a push for recycling of these demolition waste or construction waste up to a certain %. So there are ways to kind of looking at the impact and try to minimize the impact. So if that's what I could understand from the question, but if you have some other angle, please put it up there and we'll get it back to you on that. So, and then the second part is, how can we calculate the waste being generated as per built use? Do we have different composition for each waste? Again, will it be different composition? Depends on what kind of construction you have. If you're talking about buildings, of course, different types of materials are used in buildings as opposed to a bridge or like a highway construction. So there will be, so since there are different types of material, of course, you will have different composition, and that composition will depend on what kind of material is used for that particular construction. If it's a typical house, nowadays houses are also getting different. Newer buildings have a lot of steel, they are using steel, and they are using a lot of glass. So you will have those kind of waste coming up. If you are looking at the demolition waste from an older building, you will have mostly bricks, concretes, and those kind of stuff. So that's and then how to calculate. Of course, you have to do some sampling. You have to find out how much waste is produced, and that typically done for a construction and demolition waste. When you put it in these big trucks, you know the volume of the truck, you know the density of the material that is being dumped there. So you kind of estimate based on volume and density how much mass was produced, and based on the construction like area, you can say what is the per unit area. So you can go get those numbers. Now going to the next, there is Ms. S. Khare. The question number 1 is, sir, is it safe to use fly ash as a construction material at all? The potential problem of leaching of heavy metals from it will always remain. Even if somehow chemically make the construction material such that no leaching occur, it still isn't a risk to let potential heavy metal contaminant out there in the ambient environment. Landfilling the ash would at least allow us to secure the potential contaminant at a known location in known concentration. I would like to know your opinion on this. Again, see, whenever you look at a solution, there is always a plus and minus. So, if you are trying to use fly ash as a construction material, whether it's in cement, whether it's in brick, there is always we have to test. We have to test. I totally agree with you that we have to look at potential leachability of contaminant from those product which is made using fly ash, or for that matter any recycled material. And that's what it is called beneficial reuse risk assessment. And I think in one of the videos I talk about that. And so that's needed, but and with doing that beneficial reuse risk assessment, we arrive at a certain percentage. For example, at what percent of fly ash I can use in my brick so that the leaching is not of a problem. And most of this leaching test is done in a highly conservative environment, so like a worst case leaching scenario. So the leaching test results that you get is actually one of the worst things you will potentially see in an environmental scenario for most of the cases. Of course, there are we have to simulate different environmental conditions in the lab and look at the leaching, but at the same time, if what you are suggesting in terms of putting that in the landfill also doesn't have any guarantee. Because the liners, even if you have an engineered landfill, most of our landfills are still dump sites if I talk about Indian context, but even if you go for an engineered landfill, those liners are not going to last forever, and there could be something happening with the landfill. So there is a risk there as well. So it's not that landfill will be a although we will know that problem is there. See, but at the same time, looking from a sustainable development point of view, looking from a life cycle perspective and sustainability perspective, it is always better to reuse the waste material, of course taking into consideration environmental risk. So fly ash to certain extent can be used in cement and other places, but again, I agree with you on that part, that it has to be looked from an environmental risk assessment point of view as well, which many times we don't do it. In fact, other countries have some beneficial reuse risk assessment protocols. In India, it's mostly only on a structural aspect. It's not from an environmental angle, and that environmental angle has to be bring into. And as part of the research that we do at IIT Kharagpur, we are trying in that area as well. So now the second question is pretty long. I'll just kind of read a summary of that, because it says, I would like to know your opinion on how to tackle plastic pollution in seas. And Mr. Khare is suggesting that we could collect all the plastic and put it in a waste to energy plant, which can be built along the sea, along the coastline, and then that can generate energy and all that. So this may mean that the expenditure for collection of plastic might be compensated by the money earned by energy production. That is why the problem of plastic islands is still not solved. See, and you have some references put there. One of them is Great Pacific Garbage Patch and the UN and some of ABC News website. So the reason for these those garbage patches that is there in the sea, those garbage patches are huge. Some of them are as big as the continent of Australia. So the Australasia continent, it is as big as that continent. So the Oceania continent. So it's a huge area from which the plastic has to be collected and brought it to this incineration plant. And then it will be wet. So you have to make it dry as well. So when you dry it, you will be losing moisture. You will be losing energy for drying purposes. And what will you do with those waste to energy plants after you run up with those plastics from ocean? Of course, it will run for at least few years. But thing is that collecting those plastic from the ocean is not an easy task. There are some people making some effort. You can Google it, you can look at on YouTube. There are some people making those effort, and that those seas can be cleaned up. And there are ways. There are some companies which are already working on that, different types of trap where they are trying to collect those plastic. But that is one aspect. But rather than thinking, in my view, rather than thinking about the waste to energy plant at the sea, getting all those plastic, then drying it, the focus should be more on how not to get this plastic into the ocean at the first place. So rather than letting it go to the ocean, we should need to do a proper job in terms of the collection of the plastic waste and treatment of those plastic waste before it goes to the ocean. So the reason why it is getting to the ocean is because we are doing a very poor job in terms of collection, especially those filled plastic, single-use plastic, which as a country we will be banning it by 2022. That's per the government announcement. So collection of the plastic waste, treatment of the plastic waste, that should be the focus. we can use waste to energy plants as part of that solution. Waste to energy plant could be, it's a plastics has a good calorific value. Some like a PET, HDPE, those plastics can be easily recycled as well, and there are market already out there for those recycling. So that's that will be my take on that. And let's focus on not letting it into the ocean. Whatever is there in the ocean, of course, it needs to be cleaned up, and there are people looking at ways to clean it up. There is already some work going on in that area, which you can find again on those website too. And has a third question as well, like which methods of treating waste have the brightest future? For instance, we may expect landfilling to be obsolete in 3-4 decades, at least in the developed nations. Say which method of treating waste have the brightest future? In fact, it depends on, as I said in the last live session, also several times in lecture videos, what solution will work depends on the local condition. And in some places, like in the drier climate, if the garbage is dry, if the waste is dry and waste has a good calorific value, waste to energy plants will work, RDF plants will work, and refuse derived fuel will work. But if you are in a very wet weather and your collection does not have any sorts of covering of the garbage, your garbage gets wet, then waste to energy will not work. So see, technologies are, most of the technologies which is out there, they will work in some scenario or some other scenario. It depends on your location, it depends on the type of garbage that your city, your ULB is producing, and based on that and how good you are able to do the source segregation. If you are doing a great job in source segregation in terms of at least wet and dry, as the new Municipal Solid Waste Management Rules 2016 requires us to do, the wet waste can be used in composting, anaerobic digestion, biomethanation, and there are lots of processes out there. The dry waste, if good calorific value, can be used for waste to energy plants, and there could be other technologies out there. So there cannot be just one technology which has the brightest future. Most of the technologies will stay as long as we apply the technology properly in Indian context. Now, the Smita Sarma, she has a question that how do the local government designate a particular location for a dump site? Are there any norms for it? Is it like its distance from the water body? Yes, for the dump site. See, there are norms, but many times these norms has not been getting not been followed, especially in our Indian context, because of the lack of area. Because if there is a dump site, there is a certain areas which is kind of in a deserted area, like too far from the present city, and somebody starts dumping garbage there, and then the municipality starts using that as a dump site. But for an engineered landfill, as per the CPHEO manual, which is already out there, which was revised in 2016 or 2017, that time frame, there are guidelines. So you can look at those. There are certain guidelines that it has to be certain distance from the river, from the water body. It has to be away from the airport. There should not be in an unstable area. And I think in the landfill chapter of the video, in which we talk about landfill, we do talk about those locations as well. So that slides give you more detail on that. Mr. Anil Kumar Nigam is saying that I am a retired executive engineer and served the nation in Ganga pollution control work. I am also a chartered engineer of Institution of Engineers India in environmental engineering. My question is that how far this course will be useful for assisting ULBs, particularly in Indian context. So, and then he has like, sir, thank you very much. I enjoyed this valuable course. So thank you for enjoying the valuable course. You are and thank you for your service to the nation. But in terms of whether how it is going to be useful for assisting ULBs, I'm making an effort. The reason this course is being offered, first time it was offered last year, as you may be aware, and then again it has been rerun this year, and let's see how it goes. Maybe it will be rerun few more times in coming years. So reason, the purpose of this course is to, as if you have seen, since you said that you are enjoying this valuable course, so I assume that you have been watching all the videos, and in each of the contests I try to bring the Indian angle. Although most of my waste management experience is in overseas, but still I try to bring, I'm still learning how things work in India. So, in terms of the Indian angle, what could be potentially work in India, what will not potentially work in India. So I hope the ULB engineers are taking this course, and the people who make decision in the ULB systems, they take this course and they can take advantage of all the different information that has been provided. So those were the questions which was submitted for this particular live session. Now there are some questions on discussion forum, and then we'll start getting those live questions coming, which are already coming in. So Pragya Shukla has one question on why we are aerating anaerobic sand filters. Anaerobic is something absence of air, and why we are supplying air there. So sand filters are actually, I don't know where you got this idea that there is a anaerobic sand filters, in which the reason for which we put some air through is to get both aerobic as well as anaerobic activities going on, so that whatever could not be treated in the anaerobic system can be treated with aerobic system. As you know, there are different types of bacteria. There is aerobic bacteria, there is an anaerobic bacteria, and some organic contaminants can be degraded, some of the by anaerobic group of bacteria, and some can be by the aerobic group of bacteria. So that kind of helps with that, and the aeration also helps in terms of ammonia getting oxidized and all those in those processes too. Malay Goyal, he has two questions. Where we are in terms of MSW 2016 implementation on ground? Does CPCB reviews the progress and publishes report is statewide in India for the various line items which are time bound as per MS 2016, like MSW 2016? So in terms of where we are in implementation of ground, I don't have, because I don't get those reports. Those reports does not get submitted to us. We can we only also look at the CPCB website and other places to get the information from. So in terms of there are some activities, but if you look at several ULBs, if you look at the Swachh Sarvechan surveys, and based on some of the cities that we have looked very carefully, very closely, like Ahmedabad, Vizag, Visakhapatnam, Guwahati, and Indore, and some Bhopal and some other cities, there are activities happening on ground. It's not that nothing is happening on ground. There are activities happening on ground. Of course, it is taking time. The Indian waste management system, as I say in many of the courses, we are like almost 40-50 years behind than where the Europeans are today, and so it will take time. There is no magic solution here. It requires dedicated hard work and honest hard work. And one of the most important thing that I think we need is development of infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, like physical infrastructure for ULBs, and I hope they will get the monies to do that, because they need it, because even to follow waste management rules 2016, we need wet and dry to be separate. That's the two. There are other like a household hazardous waste, but at least wet and dry. So wet and dry, if it in the house it is separate, it should be separate in the truck. It should be separate toward the transfer station. It should be taken separately to the treatment plants. And for that, unfortunately, most of the ULBs doesn't have the infrastructure as of today, but there are some infrastructure coming. So glass is always half full. So you have things are improving. It will take some time to do that. And does the CPCB reviews the progress, publishes report? I haven't looked at the CPCB website very recently, but yeah, there are certain timelines. There are certain timelines which they have to do, but we can look at CPCB report, the CPCB website, and probably get back to you on the discussion forum on that. But that's, I'm not aware whether they are publishing any report, like which city is in compliance, which city is not in compliance, because we are mostly looking at from the technical side. So we have not followed up on CPCB website on that aspect. Now the second question is how the pie chart will be made for a sample of food waste. I mean, if one picks a sample, say 1 bucket of waste, then how the data is collected? It is on weight basis. I mean, I segregate the bucket waste into paper, plastic, food waste, leaves, and blah blah blah, and then weigh them separately, then draw pie chart. Is there a specific weighing machine to be used? Again, if you go back to your waste characterization video, which is I think maybe week 2 or towards the end of week 1, if I remember correctly, there we have shown you example of how to do it. There are 2 ways to do it. One is your material flow methodology, and the other was source specific. What you are referring to is actually a source specific. So, and then just one food waste sample is not good enough. You have to do multiple sample. We talk about the statistics that waste is a heterogeneous. So, you have to do a multiple sample from different household. If you are trying to represent a city, you should get into different locations of the city, like high income, low income, institutional area, these are the different areas. And you can look it up. There are like you will find certain DPRs which have been done under Smart Cities mission, where they have done it. They have done different kind of sampling, and then you will you can weigh. You can use any weighing balance. It doesn't really matter which weigh balance you use, as long as you get, say, accurate value. And yes, you have to separate into different paper, plastic, food waste, and then come up with a pie chart. Again, go back and look at that video, and you will kind of, if you need to, just to get more details on that. Then the other one is Smith Humber or Thumber, like Mosmi Thumber. What can be some innovative measure to reduce landfill issues in Indian context? Landfill, I think you are talking about the dump sites. So, in terms of the dump sites, again, I keep on saying that again and again. If we do the source segregation, we will have the treatment plants working. The reason most of the treatment plants in Indian context did not work, because we had a mixed heterogeneous waste. The technologies were not bad. It was just that we didn't implement the technology properly. Whether it's a Timarpur, whether there are, even we hear that some of the newer plants are also struggling. So, it's all because the technologies are not being implemented properly. So, dump sites can be closed down once we have a good source segregation system in place, good collection system in place, and good treatment system in place. There is, again, as I said earlier, there is no magic solution here, and there is in fact, most of the technology that needs to be used is already out there. We can look at some of the newer stuff in terms of when you talk about innovative measures. We are doing some research right now in terms of looking at, since the source segregation may potentially take some years down the line, some maybe a few decades. So, can we use the mixed MSW for, say, fuel production, doing some hydrothermal carbonization and those kind of stuff. So, there are PhD students working on those areas. So, again, and the anaerobic digestion side also we are doing some work. So, there is room for innovation, but basically to reduce the dump sites, we have to have proper collection, so source segregated, proper treatment facility with the technologies which will work in Indian context. Don't go for hi-fi technology. Unfortunately, we have a habit of trying to create Taj Mahal with a state-of-art technology which the world rarely uses, which we try to use it over here, and then we fail, because it's not going to work in Indian context. The technology should be relevant to the context. Which are the free software for landfill designing? I don't know. So, there are some softwares, you can Google it. If it's free, you will find it there. But you will not really get any software which will get you full landfill design, because nobody will put up there. They will do, of course, anybody who makes an effort to make a landfill design software will use it for money, isn't it? He will become a consultant for landfill design. Why he will put it up there? So, there are some simple tools, there are some apps which I am aware, but that just gives you very basic information, not too much information. Then Piyush Jain has one question. Sir, we know that while combustion taking place, flame is burning on the grates. When the grates rotates about its axis, how can flame can burn as it goes down and again come up, and the waste is available in upper side only? So, what is needed of the rotating type grates? Again, the way that it is designed, it does not really rotate in rotation is in such a small, like the RPM is so small, it doesn't really matter, because the waste is, if you remember that hooper, the waste is flowing down gradually. Waste is also flowing down. So, as there are two types of grate. One was the step, like you had the different steps. So, one step to another step. So, that just goes little bit down, and then the waste from the top comes in there. And even if it's a circular one, the circular one moves in a very slow, and the waste from the top keeps on coming down. So, yes, what you are saying will probably is technically possible, but the way it is designed, practically it doesn't happen. So, waste has a continuous flow, and the garbage keeps on burning. And the next question is from single.env. What is the time taken to decompose 1 kg of organic waste under aerobic and anaerobic condition? There is, you cannot answer this question like this way, because organic waste, it will depend on what is the degradability of organic waste, isn't it? So, based on, if you have looked at the lectures carefully, there is something called biodegradable fraction, and there is a volatile solid, biological volatile solid. So, it depends, it totally depends on what are those parameters. So, based on that, some will take less. If you have more lignin, it will take more time to degrade. If you have less lignin, it will take less time to degrade, if you are talking about those. And typically aerobic takes less time to degrade, anaerobic takes more time to degrade, because that's the typical. That's a composting. If you have just have the food waste and you want to use it for compost, that degrades pretty much around like you can have within a month you can have a good quality compost. Again, it depends on what kind of compost plant you have. So, to say that your question actually needs more information, what kind of organic waste you are talking about, what kind of treatment system you are talking about, there is otherwise this we cannot really answer this question, but I hope you got the point what I am trying to say. So, now we will start looking at some of the newer like whatever is being coming up now. There is a question from Sanchita Mishra. Can we devise route optimization technique for solid waste management? Yes, you can do route optimization technique. I think you are talking about the solid waste management collection system. So, waste collection system, as I say in that lecture videos as well, is very similar to what Amazon or Flipkart or any company uses for route optimization, because it's essentially moving something from point A to point B. So, we can do route optimization. It is done in waste collection system. Many cities around the world uses software. There are some companies which are actually dedicated on route optimization using linear programming and like OR, operation research and optimization techniques. So, those it is done. There is already yes, you can do it. So, is there any software available for solid? Yes, there are software available. Again, you have to if you, I don't remember the name of the software, but we can put it up on your discussion forum. So, I'll ask my TS to keep a note on that, and then we can put one on the discussion forum where the softwares are available, but they are not available for free as far as I remember. You can come up with your own software, like we have students in doing as part of their master's thesis trying to come up with their own softwares, but so because it's a complex problem, but you can handle that. But at the same time, if you want to use a buy a software, you can buy a software as well. There are softwares available which you can buy. And there are several software available, and see, even if you put some certain things on discussion forum, we are not endorsing any company. There are lots of companies out there, and I am not going to endorse a particular company. We will just give you some names of the company. You can select whichever, because that is not our job to endorse a company. And the other question is how to manage hospital waste products. So, hospital waste, we have the medical waste management rules which tells how to manage hospital waste, and all the bigger hospitals, they are supposed to have their own waste incinerator. The smaller hospitals are supposed to have a cooperative kind of agreement where they can use waste together and do the use that for many hospitals can come together, and then they can have their own waste incinerator, or they can tie up with a bigger hospital and do that. So, most of the hospital waste needs to be incinerated because of all this infectious and bacterial body fluids, all those things that is present. It needs to be treated by thermally treated before it can be reused or for any, or can be after that maybe landfill. So, that is the part of that. Suraj Kumar Bhagat, how to control and manage plastic waste in MSW in African countries. So, I think it is the same, whether you are if you like, I have been to Nigeria, and the Nigerian condition, that was in 2012-13 when I went to Nigeria. It is a while, almost 6 years ago, where there as part of the UN project, and that's the only, I've been to Ghana, but didn't see much garbage related stuff there, but in Nigeria we were working on garbage. So I can tell you from my experience, the situation is one of the worst cities in India. So Lagos situation that we found at that particular time, I don't know what it is today, was actually one of the worst. You can think about one of the worst waste management system in India, and that was the Lagos was. So it's a similar scenario. So similar things can be done. So again, the bottom line is the same. If you can keep the plastic separate, you can use it, you can recycle it, you can use it for waste to energy. If you have plastic with other high calorific value material, you can use it for that. So it's the basic concept remains the same. It doesn't matter whether you are in India or in Africa. So answer M talks about how to conduct waste audit, how to collect waste sample for waste characterization for both physical and biological. So for waste audit, again, you have to come up with a waste composition. Just I answered a question a few minutes back. Probably you got the answer there already, but just I'll just quickly rephrase that. It's you have to select the site. There are methods. There is a ASTM method also. There is a quartering method where how to collect a representative sample, and you get the representative sample, and then you look at say divide into different fraction. If it's too wet, you may have to dry it up first and put it in a plastic paper, and then come up with the weight and do your pie chart. So that kind of gives you the waste pie chart. Then characterization for physical and biological, that will give you the physical characterization. You have to do ultimate analysis, elemental analysis, and we talked about all that in first week or early second week. Biological you can do using BMP test. You can find out the VS biological, we have volatile solids, and BMP test will give you how much is potential methane potential. That kind of gives you the biological characterization. So these things are already kind of there in that lecture videos. So but still, if you have any question, put it on the discussion forum, and we'll again clarify that for you. Now this idiotic mission, how is the waste managed in IIT Kharagpur? So waste right now in IIT Kharagpur, we are trying to set up a system in IIT Kharagpur. We are in process of setting up a system in terms of having a source segregation. Presently, we don't have source segregation in IIT system. In most of the areas, maybe in some areas we do, but most of the areas it is not. It is collected separately, collected together, and it is going to going to a landfill site. And some are also recycled. Some are recycled plastic papers from the market and from restaurants area. It is being recycled. So that's what it is. And then Tamil Santi Pandit, can you give some reference for testing biodegradability of MSW? Since you asked for some references, we can put it on the discussion forum for you for that the those references. But again, as I said just before this question, the last question, that you can do BMP test, and there are some other tests you can do as well for the biodegradability. But we can put some references for you up there in the discussion forum for you to follow. So just put those in line. Then Manikant Barik, the question is regarding the solid waste and hazardous waste from medium-sized automotive industries. If these industries produce waste and open burning, what would happen? Then what could be the potential chances to mitigate these burnt hazardous waste which mixed with soil and in infiltration happens? Okay, then here's the second part, but let's answer the first part. So solid waste and hazardous waste from medium-sized automotive industries. So again, it depends on automotive industries. So probably if they are using if the oils are being used, or if it's essentially metal. So some other, depending on what are the different composition which is there in the waste, and because automotive industry also has, if you look at a car, it has some plastic, nowadays more plastic, there is also metals, there are also some foamy kind of material, there are some leather, could be for the leather sheet, there are some electronics, there is always a computer nowadays in a car, so which kind of controls all the control system. So if you are talking about a dumped automotive or it's a brand new automotive, the nature of the waste will be different. But in both the cases, first of all, of course, you have to look at what kind of material it is. Open burning is totally no. Open burning of anything containing plastic is totally no. Open burning in general should not really happen. As I say in I think few of the lecture videos, that dioxins and furans are the number one issues of number one. So open burning is the number one cause of dioxins and furans in the environment, and that's not my data. That's what UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, they have done some study and they have been reporting that. So open burning of garbage is what doesn't matter which kind of garbage, should be avoided at all cost. It does happen, I know, and it should not happen, but it does happen in pretty much many parts of the world. So open burning will lead to, of course, air pollution and all those kind of issues. So which, but if it gets with the soil and infiltration happens, again depends on the soil type. If it's mostly sandy soil, if the contaminant can leach through, it can contaminate groundwater. If it's mostly clay, those are two extremes. It may contaminate surface water, it will just flow through the surface, let the stormwater runoff. So it depends on the site. Yes, but it has chances to contaminate. What will be the future study can be done on this if the air, water and soil pollution is happening along with the health of the environment deteriorates by this burning of hazardous waste is still happening? The future study again in Indian context, one of the things we don't have is how much real the health impact is there because of the improper burning of garbage. We have anecdotal evidence that if not managing garbage properly, people are, especially the people working in the garbage sector, those informal recyclers, the rag pickers, they are getting sick. And there are also some reports you will find from time to time which says that many of them doesn't live for long, they die at a very young age, and there are issues of personal protective equipment, needles getting sticking or all those kind of stuff. But those kind of data is not, those anecdotal evidences are there, but there is no scientific study as such which can really show that yes, because of improper management of waste, we had this health impact. Just because we don't collect our pollution data very carefully, at least until very recently, now we do. So once we have, and because these are kind of epidemiological study, you have to look at the health of the population in that area, you have to look at the emissions in that area, then try to correlate. Also sometimes you may have to get the blood sample, urine samples and do all those kind of environment, like a public health kind of research, environmental public health research, and that is we don't have those kind of data as very much available. So of course that will be something which can help government to prioritize, because any government has limited budget. So it will help government to prioritize the sector in which they should put more focus on in terms of taking care of pollution from garbage and other sources. Suraj Kumar Bhakt, it says, kindly share one most effective way to motivate to manage on-site house solid waste management. I'm not a motivational speaker, but so one of the most effective way to motivate to manage on-site house solid waste management. There are some good practices happening, and there could be many places, and I'm just giving this example because I have been to that place. So there is, if you go in Kerala, although Kerala has a recent time had some very hard times because of the flood, but in Amritapuri area there is one ashram, and in that particular ashram they have a very elaborate waste management system. They separate, even hairs get separated. In from the dust, the hair is separated, different types of plastic is separated, different types of paper is separated, and they make good money out of that. They recycle many of those recyclables. They try to keep the garbage clean, which is basically to separate different fraction, and that's how they are able to do it. So if you go and visit them, and then of course you will have you will see that when they can separate 17, 18 categories, government is just asking me to separate wet and dry. So let's at least do that. And one thing which I have also seen, which I would like to point out, that most of the people who works on that ashram are actually not from India. Those who are taking care of the waste management are the foreigners who are devotees, and they stay in the ashram. And only 1 or 2 Indians I saw out of a team of maybe 30, 35. The lady who runs that particular place is actually from US. So people from abroad are coming and help and doing a wonderful job in India, and we Indians are not doing it because the way unfortunately the way the culture has been that garbage is a business of the maid servants or the servants. We produce garbage at home, but we don't want to touch it, and it's always, but the foreigners are coming and they are cleaning in India in that particular ashram, and maybe probably at other places too. So we need to learn from them, and that probably can motivate you to do it better. Answers how waste management is done in Meghalaya area like Cherrapunji. Again, I don't have the first hand information from there. You can go on their website. These are kind of very specific questions, so you have to go on their website and try to find it, or talk to somebody in NIT Meghalaya who does in the environmental engineering. I don't know because but I would Meghalaya in the northeast that I have visited a little bit, I have found them to be relatively cleaner because the population density is also less. So I hope that they are doing it better than some say North India and other places. How is solid waste done in hilly area? Is situation of solid waste management in hilly cities same as in low lying cities? Sikkim does a wonderful better job and hilly areas have their lot of challenges are there in hilly areas, of course, in terms of waste management. But again, most of the, as I said in the earlier question, hilly areas also have there is challenges in terms of the slopes, but at the same time the population density is also less. And most of these hilly areas are also tourist destinations. So people try to keep things clean, not the tourists, the local population try to keep the things clean because they want to attract tourists. So that's why you probably see a little bit cleaner hilly areas as compared to the low lying areas. Other aspect in hilly areas that we hear sometime is they have a lot of spaces in between the hills to hide their garbage. So that's why you don't see it as well. So, but in general, since again it's in hilly cities in India, I have not gone and seen the first hand myself, but I would assume that they are slightly better than low lying cities. Vivek Kashyap, can the waste management be a business model as solution in future, like profitable and beneficial for both end? Yes, see there are companies, waste management company in US which is a Fortune 500 company. They started small, but they are very big today. There are several companies, Veolia, Republic, and there are lots of companies out there which I'm talking about global companies who are providing waste management solutions, and they are doing good. The reason, but most of these places, things started with government. That's what one thing I try to stress upon in many of the meetings wherever I talk about that waste management, that waste to wealth, waste to gold, those terminology cannot really be true of for India as of today. There are good goals, and we should have a good goal, we should have a good target to have a waste to wealth or waste to gold. But before you go to that level, you have to do some basic work, and the basic work is sort segregation of garbage, ULBs having a good infrastructure, and many of these basic work requires lot of investment and not a lot of profit in the short term. And if you look at the waste management for any big cities around the world, any good country in the Western Europe or North America, which they are doing decent well in the waste management, everything is started with government first. Later on, private parties came in picture because the initial phase of waste management, where India is right now, does not generate a lot of money. If there is a company which thinks that most of the company, the way they think, as I understand, if I may be wrong, but the way I understand is that they try to put an investment and they want the return of investment within say 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Waste management probably will not do that. It takes time because first of all, if all of India starts, even the area where the company is being set up, if they try to do a very great job in wet and dry separation, then probably yes, but it takes time, and that's why the government bodies were involved. And even today in many of the European countries, government bodies are partly involved. It's not totally privatized. In some areas maybe, but most of the areas it is kind of public-private partnership or even public, and most of the work is started as public, and then they moved on to other sector when it became more profitable. Because the first job is waste management. Second job is to first focus should be on managing the waste so that the environment doesn't get polluted. That should be the focus of waste management program, and then of course try to recover resources from that. But that is the second goal. Primary goal is to manage the waste properly so that impact on environment is less. Jeet Sharma, I think it's from Toronto area. Would you be willing to discuss the energy balance aspect of waste management? Energy balance, I think you are talking about in terms of how much energy is getting into this in one particular process and how much energy we are getting out. So we do discuss that in the course. It's a part of where we talk about life cycle aspect. And there is another course which is offered in the other semester, which kind of focused on life cycle analysis and sustainability aspect. So there we do talk about energy balance. But to answer your question, just to quickly, if I want to answer that, the answer is yes. We do discuss. The online videos are available where we have some discussion along this line. And for any technology, when you look at, you have to look at from a systems perspective. You have to look at like what is the net energy gain. So if I are trying to do waste to energy, and if I end up inputting more energy than the energy I am getting out of the system, it doesn't really work. And that's why the system perspective is very important, and we do talk about that in the course. Sabi Thanam, sir, we are trying to clean a canal which is polluted due to waste dumped into it. How to manage this waste removed from canal, which includes plastic waste mixed with silt and water? So again, we are trying to clean the canal which is polluted due to waste. So of course, you have to have some sort of like JCBs to trench. You have to take out from those trench. So you need those physical machines to take it out. And then if it's plastic waste mixed with silt and water, one thing you can do, if you can have a open area, you can put a HDPE sheet like a tarp, and then put that plastic with the waste on there. When it's dry, you can take the plastic out, and then silt and water, potentially water will evaporate. Silt, if there is nothing else other than plastic, silt will be more or less clean, but I would recommend that you should test that silt as well before you use it for any other construction purposes, for heavy metals and other contaminants. And the plastic, you can use it in whatever ways, whether at a like if it's a recyclable, it can be recycled and other things. So that's the simple solution. There is no magic solution here. Of course, you have to get it out and then get it dried and then use it. Tezamul Safi Pandit, how much feasible do you see the concept of house biogas appliance? Would it be feasible taking into account waste from homes of 4 to 6? I think you are talking about the house biogas appliance. Would it be feasible taking into account waste from house of 4 to 6? Again, if you it depends on how much biogas you want. Like personally, I don't have experience of a house biogas appliance to tell you how much gas will be produced, but you can do these calculations. You can look at the waste that is produced, say from 4 to 6 house. Typically, how much waste, bio waste that you have? Is it 1 kg of waste per house? Depending on the number of people in the house. If you know food waste, there is in the literature you can find the typical formula of food waste. In the lecture videos, we have talked about how to calculate the methane that is being produced from those food waste. So you can come up with the volume of gas that can be potentially produced, and then from that you can find out how much is the gas generated and whether it will be useful or not, how much revenue you can make, and what would be your buyback period, and how much days it will take, days, months or years it will take before you can break even. So those calculation based on the things that is provided in the lectures, you can potentially do that. Now Jagdish Sodhihal, health impact of unscientific land dumping of urban solid waste nearby rural areas are very much concerned in India. Any appropriate solution for this problem in coming days? Again, the solutions are people like you and me. We have to start behaving properly and do the source segregation. So health impact is there, and at least now people are realizing that waste management, improper waste management is creating health impact. So that's a good thing. It is happening in the rural areas, also in the urban areas. Any appropriate solution? Again, as I said, there is no magic solution. We have to have a proper waste management system for each, whether it's a rural area, urban area, small cities and big cities, and that means following the waste management rules 2016, following the CPHU manual for most part. There are of course things may be tailored a little bit depending on where we are, which technology to choose and which technology to not. We have to do the waste characterization study for each of the area at least and then come up with proper technology to use. So there is again no magic solution. Coming days, coming years, coming months, if we work hard, if we based on basic principle of source segregation, proper collection, selection of appropriate technology based on the waste composition, and using those technology, and then of course the solution will come. But the thing is that we have to work on it. We cannot just wait and then think that solution will come from somewhere. Okay, so kindly start a course in future based on how to start the business in solid waste management or how to become consultant in solid waste management in India. I can probably do the second part, the how to become consultant in solid waste management in India. I don't think I have enough business background to start a course on business in solid waste management. If we have to do it, we have to do it in collaboration. If I find some of my business school friends excited, we can probably think about that. But again, it has to be approved by NPTEL. But how to become consultant in solid waste management, I don't think NPTEL will allow me to offer that course. But yeah, if you can talk to me privately and we can talk about that off the line. Answer M, some NPTEL courses are offering internship for the toppers. Do you offer any internship in future? Yes, there are, which you got the email from NPTEL office. I think if I remember from the email, it's for 2 months and you will probably get some support as well. So those of you who are interested, you can apply for the internship. And based on those, we will consider those. And if your credentials are good, then we will of course will have some evaluation process, and based on that we will select some internship. So that's in terms of the different the questions that we have, which is coming in on the online session. So we don't have any further question right now, but let's discuss if we look at, and in the meantime we'll another 5 minutes, and then if something comes up we'll take that as well. So in terms of, if you look at the different questions that came today, which was very similar to the question we had in the live session 1 as well. It's kind of trying to how the problem will be solved, and I have said that n number of times, and I will say it again n+1 times, that we have to work on developing a proper infrastructure for the urban areas as well as the rural area. And when I say the infrastructure, we need good trucks, we need good collection, we need a transfer station, we need engineered landfills, and we should see the waste management system. When you look at the different technology, composting, even if you look at the waste management rules or CPHU manual, and those of you who are really interested in waste management, I would strongly encourage you to look at waste management rules 2016, which we already discussed in one of the lecture videos, and also CPHU manual, which we refer to you as well in some of the lecture. And so based on, so they give a good information. There are, of course, any document there will be some shortcomings. So there are certain shortcomings in this document which we discussed in the lecture video. So I'm not going to repeat it here, but at the same time, what we need is good capacity, infrastructure capacity, as well as intellectual capacity. With the visit of several ULBs that I have done in this part of India as well as in little bit in other parts of India, what I have found is even the workers who are working in ULBs, they are not really aware of the complexity of the garbage and the health effect from the garbage. I have seen people burning styrofoam and just sitting around it, and which is not a good idea, because that can make you sick. So burning of garbage should be totally no. But ULB people still, you will find that they do that because so many times they are ignorant of it, or sometimes because they think that it's too bulky. If I put it in the truck, it will take too much of a space. But again, it should not happen. And Source segregation, that's the very, very important if we want to do any technology to work, whether we do it at home or whether we do it at a centralized facility. But we have to do the segregation of garbage, and better to do it at home, and then only there are the different technologies will come. And in terms of the selection of technology, of course, you have to look at the energy balance, you have to look at the economic aspect and those things in terms of how much energy is, if you, especially if those you are going for waste to energy, all the bodies, all the material have some inherent energy, like what we call that inbuilt energy. So we have to look at those aspects as well in terms of having a systems approach and more comprehensive. So I think we could answer the question. Again, if you have some queries, we have noted down some of the questions in which we have said that we will put things on discussion forum, which we will do that. And so we see that there is another last question has come in. So this will be the last question and then we'll close. How should we manage daily waste in our local home and society ideally? So again, in your society and local home, try to at least do the wet and dry separation. If you have a bigger home, you can go for a home composter. There are home composter available, which you can make your own compost from your organic waste and use it for fertilizer. For any landscaping and other things that you do. If you are living in an apartment complex for your society, try to as a society initiative, try to tell people to do the source segregation, take the wet waste, and you can go for again compost if it's a smaller society. If it's a bigger society, if you have lots of apartments, good amount of food waste that is being produced, you can go for anaerobic digestion, biomethanation, those kind of plants as well. But again, it's an economy of a scale. Things has to work for that particular thing. So with that, with this last question, we will kind of end up. So there is no further question. So thank you, and there will be another live session, which we will announce you down the line. And I think the exams are also coming up very soon. So the next live session is before the exam, and if you have any questions related to exam, you can post during those, and if you can post on the discussion forum and we'll answer that. Thank you. Hope you are enjoying this course. See you again. So that Jeet Sarma was actually professor in.
I noticed that.